Welcome to our trial garden. It's June 21st and I'm here at our delicata squash area, and I'm already noticing some troublemaker pests on our delicata squash. It's the squash bug. I'll tell you about them and some things to do to prevent and control them. The adult squash bug is about 5/8 inch long and dark brown to gray in color. It has a hard shell and a shield-like shape. The adults overwinter under plant debris and things like rocks or boards in and around the garden. They re-emerge in the spring to early summer, around mid-June. Then they lay clusters of reddish-colored eggs, usually on the underside of the leaves. And since they continue to lay eggs throughout the summer, at some point you'll likely see all stages of the squash bug on the plant: the eggs, the nymphs, as well as the adults. Both the adults and the nymphs cause damage by piercing the leaves and sucking out the sap. This results in tiny yellow spots that eventually turn tan or brown. This feeding activity also blocks the flow of water in the leaves and can eventually cause them to wilt. Now, there are some things you can do to prevent and control the squash bug in your garden. The first is to practice good garden sanitation. In the fall, clean up all plant debris, rocks, boards, or anything that could be an overwintering site for the squash bug. Then, during the growing season, maintain healthy squash plants by proper watering and fertilization. Healthy plants can better withstand feeding damage than stressed or weakened plants. Now, we are trying a couple of different control methods for the squash bug here in our trial garden. One of them is this row cover. This is a fine mesh fabric that covers the squash plants, and it allows sunlight and water to go through to the plants, but it keeps the adult squash bug out. You'll want to secure the row cover in a way that the squash bug will not be able to crawl underneath. And here we're using some rocks, some bricks, whatever will be able to help you secure the fabric to the soil. Ideally, you'll want to place the row cover early in the season when the plants are still young or small. And the other thing to remember about row covers is that you'll need to remove them when the plants start to flower, because you'll want bees and other pollinating insects to have access to the flowers for pollination. Another thing that we are trialing is this silver plastic mulch. We have it around 3 different varieties of our delicata squash at these 3 trellises. Research has shown that the reflective properties of this silver mulch deter or repel some insects that are damaging to squash plants. And there is an added benefit, like other plastic mulches, that it helps retain moisture in the soil and keeps out the weeds. Now, probably the most important thing in controlling the squash bugs is scouting, and scouting early in the season and as often as possible. You'll want to be looking for the adults as well as the eggs and the nymphs. We actually have seen a few of the adult squash bugs already in our garden, and when we found them, we removed them and destroyed them. So when you're scouting, be looking at all of the foliage of the plants, as well as the stems or the petioles. Turn the leaves over and look at all parts. Now here, you'll see on the underside of this leaf, there is this characteristic pattern of these squash bug eggs right here. I would carefully remove these by just rubbing my finger over the tops of them and then crushing them with my fingers. They can be a little bit sticky onto the leaves, but if you use some gentle pressure, you'll be able to get them off. And let's check at some other leaves. Here's another one, and this is another characteristic pattern of how the squash bugs lay their eggs. They like to lay them up along the veins of the leaves, and sometimes even in this V pattern of the veins. That's very characteristic. I'll also be rubbing those off and crushing them. Now, if the eggs have hatched, you'll want to be looking for the nymphs. And the nymphs are kind of tricky because they are really fast. They congregate under the leaves, and then as you're scouting and you're rustling the leaves, they tend to scatter and they'll drop to another leaf or onto the ground. So what you want to do is have a bucket of soapy water ready and place it under the plant. And then if you find the nymphs, you can just sort of brush or knock the nymphs into the bucket of soapy water. Again, it's kind of a challenge. But another thing you can do in that case is to use a board and place it near the squash plants, and overnight they will congregate underneath the board. Then in the morning you can turn it over and then brush the nymphs into a bucket of soapy water. The adults though are another story in that they are sort of camouflaged with their dark brown to gray color, so you might not always be able to spot them. If you do see them, you'll want to pick them up and destroy them by putting them in soapy water or some other way as well. Here's a little video clip of an adult squash bug we found climbing up the outside of our row cover. Oh, now look what we found here. This is an adult squash bug, and it is something that we want to make sure we are scouting for and take away and destroy when we find it. We found it here this morning crawling on top of our row cover, so we're definitely going to destroy this. Put this in a bucket of water to drown it, or we can put it between rocks, whatever you want to do to destroy it. I'm also checking under the row cover every now and then to scout for squash bugs or nymphs, just to be careful and certain that the adult bugs haven't been able to get underneath the row cover. I think it's a good practice just to be sure. It's so important to get the eggs before they hatch into the nymphs, because that really helps to control the population. So far, I'm not seeing any squash bugs on the plants underneath our row cover. So I'm going to secure the row cover back to the soil, and hopefully they'll continue to stay out. There are some other common insect pests that attack squash plants, those being the squash vine borer and the cucumber beetle. But you can find information about those insects as well as the squash bug on the University of Minnesota Extension website. There you can also find a calendar for all three of these insects that helps you to track the timing of when they appear in your garden and some things to do to manage them. There's pictures and information on different types of control methods. It's a really great resource. So I hope you'll remember how to control and prevent squash bugs in your garden. And I'll be coming back to you with some other videos in the near future about any other issues and how our squash plants are growing in our trial garden. But in the meantime, I'm going to be scouting for some more squash bug eggs. See you next time.